everybody for virtually joining Birchbark Books tonight in celebration of Linda LeGarde Grover's latest book, Gichigami Hearts, published with University of Minnesota Press. My name is Haley Kirkwood, and along with my colleague, Anthony Sabalos, I help coordinate events for Birchbark, as well as do some old-fashioned book selling. I Zoom to you tonight from Dakota land, and I invite you to learn about and support the Indigenous communities whose land you find yourself on today. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce Linda LeGarde Grover, who is Professor Emeritus of American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota Duluth and a member of the Bois Forte Band of Ojibwe. Her books, The Road Back to Sweetgrass, Onigami Sing, Seasons of an Ojibwe Year, and In the Night of Memory, all from Minnesota Press, have earned numerous awards, including the Native Writers Circle of the Americas First Book Award, Northeastern Minnesota Book Award for Poetry, Memoir, and Fiction, and a Minnesota Book Award for Memoir and Creative Nonfiction. The Dance Boots was the winner of the Flannery O'Connor Award and the Janet Heidinger Kafka Prize. As a quick aside, all of her books are available to purchase in store or through our web shop, which Anthony mentioned before. And tonight we are gathered specifically to celebrate Gichigami Hearts, which is a small collection of 12 loosely connected essays and autobiographical stories that orbit around Linda's family history and Ojibwe life in Duluth, Minnesota in the 20th century. Topics range from the dramatic rock outcroppings that dominate the hilly landscape of the city to stories of the wolf and oral tradition, from the experiences of friends sent to live in Indian boarding houses to her family's histories along the northern shores of Lake Superior. Gichigami Hearts layers Linda's family's history alongside the lives of many who have walked Duluth streets and the stories that connect them and all of us. Please will join me in welcoming Linda.
Oh. Thank you, miigwech. Thanks so much, Haley and Anthony, and thanks so much, Birchbark Books and University of Minnesota Press, and also everybody who has joined us here this evening. I really appreciate your coming here. I'm going to talk a little bit about Gichigami Hearts. Haley's already shown you the book, and how what the book is about, and I guess how I came to write it. Then I'll read something brief from here, and then we can have some questions, answers, comments. So I think we'll just start here. I've recently retired from the University of Minnesota Duluth, and that's, hence my title, Professor Emeritus, which means that I get to keep a title and also get to go in and use the office space and stuff, which is really helpful because I've always got something that I'm writing, and so to have a place that I can go is really nice. It's a change of scene. I write a lot at home, almost all at home actually. I have this kind of nice little corner here that you can see on the screen here. All right, this isn't actually how it really looks, Here's how it really looks. Yeah, so I've got and this is the clean half of the room. I have my my sewing and my other stuff here and my research, and I do a lot of my typing and stuff just sitting on the couch or sometimes at the desk in our front room in our house, and it's kind of fun. I'm not a writer who has a special routine or way of doing things. I do want the laptop because that's how we do things these days. But outside of that, I don't have a routine. I don't write every single day. I don't. I have a friend who has published quite a lot of stuff on Cloquet River Press, and he actually has a disciplined way of living where he gets up really early every morning and writes and then goes about his day. Of course, he retired recently too, so I don't know if he really has to stick to that anymore. Gichigami Hearts has a cover with a photograph of an actual piece of beadwork art by Jessica Goki, who is a Red Cliff woman in northern Wisconsin there. And I really love this cover. It's because it's actual beadwork. And if you look close, you can really see the beads against the black background. I also like it because there are strawberries in the design, and the Ojibwe word for strawberry translated to English means heartberry. So Odaeman is a heartberry. So there are little heartberries on the cover. And it's and I did like the idea of our hearts, all of our hearts here in this book. It is a combination of Ojibwe history, of, what would you call it, written down type history, also the history that came down through the spoken word for many generations. It coincides and interweaves with the history of the Native people in all of this region, northeastern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, up into Michigan, Canada. It coincides with all of this, and it is a collective story, I guess. I'm in it, but it isn't really about me. It is about the landscape and the humans and the spirit beings who reside here. And so in this book, I write a lot about the Point of Rocks, which is a big gabbro rock outcropping that divides Duluth in half. And so this is if you've been up this way, you can't help but see the big ridge that runs from down by Carleton County all the way up, not real far from Lake Superior, sometimes right on the lake, all the way up into Canada. And that is a region that is of significance to us in our history, but also in our religious and spiritual beliefs. And so we are tied in that way, besides the physicality of being here in this terrain that is full of rocks, big rocks, little rocks, hills, trees, rough weather sometimes. And here we are on the right along Lake Superior. Some of my relatives actually came this way from the south shore of Lake Superior, from Madeline Island, and journeyed this way, and some settled in the Fond du Lac region at the western part of Duluth, and some came from up north, coming from that direction on Lake Superior. But we all have these ties to the lake. I don't even want to say it's ties to the lake, because we are of the lake. And so that figures quite a bit in what I'm doing, as do the several of the neighborhoods in Duluth here, especially the one that is called the West End, which is just west of the Point of Rocks, which is where a lot of people in my family have lived for several generations here. I touch on experiences of the late 19th and into the 20th century, up into the 21st, with my family and what I know and what I've experienced as the springboard for it. So we are in some ways representative in this book of experiences of Native people from a very long time ago up through today. My family was a boarding school family, and so a couple, 2-3 generations of my family were disrupted, and the disruption became the norm, the routine, the disruption of the children being removed from their home, from their families, from their communities, and sent away to boarding schools to be schooled and assimilated into larger American society. But you've probably already heard about that. But when you are of a family where you're right there where the impact is, what would they call it, where the rubber hits the road, that is an experience not just for my family, but for so many, that just continues to reverberate, I guess, to echo through today. And so that is present through here. Interwoven with this are the old time teachings, and what I have come to think as time has gone on here, which is that we have a great love for the old stories, the way of passing knowledge on, not just necessarily through the storytelling, but through the example, the passing on of our history, where we came from, where we're going, what is the proper way to act, and what is the good way to be, you know, an Anishinaabe person. And so that is interwoven through here and continues through the present. I have come to think, as I've been looking at things over the years, that it isn't just that the story, you know, you hear this, the stories are with us, the stories are alive, and this is absolutely true. I think if we look, we can see that we are actually from time to time reliving the stories in the setting, the time and place where we are, you know, blessed and privileged to be right now. And so that figures in this book too. I bring my own, some of my own schooling experiences as a public school child in Duluth here into this too, and trying to make a commentary on how things were and how they are now. Is there a break, you know, a jumping off place? Is there a break between past and present, between the beliefs that are foundational and what we do now? You know, you know, my life is really different from that of my grandmothers, my great grandmothers, my grandparents, who are also in this book. You know, I get to take for granted things like having, you know, my own car, getting to just go to the store and buy whatever I want to eat. My life is so different, as all of our lives are, from the past. And yet, when we look, I think we are repeating this. We are in a spiral of time that moves forward all the time. I end this book with, it's got 12 pieces. Some are poetry, some are a little bit of like historical research. Some are my kind of communication of some aspects of the old time teachings. And in one part of the book, I'm weaving an old story that, you know, we've all heard many times up here about, you know, our spirit hero Nanabuju and his brother the wolf. I have an interpretation of that is fictional and takes place in more modern times. And this is like post World War II times. I'll probably read a little section from that in a little bit here. The last section of my book is called Traveling Song, and it's named after my favorite song, which is one that is sung on many different occasions. When there is a leave taking, you know, sometimes there's a parting of ways. It's sometimes there's a sadness in this, but yet there's always that, and I hope I explain this in the book here, there is always I guess what we could look at as the literal English translation of the Ojibwe word for leave taking. There was never a word that said specifically goodbye. A word that's often used is gigawabamin, and it means, if you were taking it apart and putting it in English, that you will be seen again by me. This is going to happen again. And what I believe it means is that we'll see each other again, and if we don't, we'll see each other some other time. And I think, you know, the meaning of this is that, you know, maybe not even in this lifetime, but we'll see each other again. The Traveling Song has a story in its background about someone who was after a lot of prayer, a person who had been ill and unable to walk was able to walk. And the words in the Traveling Song, they're in Ojibwe language, but in English, the phrase is, "It is because of you that I walk," and it is a song of thanks and to the Creator for what we've been given, and understanding that, you know, this is a leave taking now. And so I end the book with that. And I end it with a memory from pretty recent years when a woman I've known since we were young women. And over the years, she's really, really funny. And I'm a person who appreciates really funny stuff. And we've weathered many, many things over the years. Our children were small, then our kids grew up. We became older people ourselves. We became older women who come to events in Onigamesing in the Duluth area here. And on one occasion, not all that long ago, there was an event downtown at the at ACO. That's where the Indian Center is downtown there in American Indian Housing. And the song was being played. It was going to be the last thing, and we were standing, listening and watching the drummers. And I kind of glanced. I kind of mumbled the words, half humming them to myself from over where I was standing. And I looked over across the room, and she was doing the same thing. And I thought, here we are now, after these many years of knowing each other through the stages of women's lives. And here we are now as older women gathering in this place that we're so thankful to have. And that, the song is a prayer, and our being there was a prayer also. So that's the traveling song. I do love it. I think maybe I'll read a little bit. Let's see. I'm gonna try to get a little bit more light here, so I hope I don't shock everybody. Ooh, okay. All right, so I'm going to read a little section from a fiction piece in here. We'll see. Keep an eye on the clock here to see where I am with this. And there are fictional people in here. They've appeared in some of my other works too. I have now, whoever thought, I have a body of work, and I'm trying to write and pass down things about northeastern Minnesota and the Ojibwe people here. And, our interactions with non-Native people, because we certainly do this all day, every day. Many of us are, have married non-Native people. And so we're familiar with these, these parts of our life. I've got it. Parts of our life. And so I write about that a lot too. I've got, fiction and nonfiction and poetry, and it all has to do with, with the passing of time, with how things have been and how we live today. Grab my book. So this is sort of a story of two men who are cousins, who in some of my earlier works are children. In some, one of them becomes an older man. Not everybody gets, that gift of getting to be an old person. And so in this book, perhaps we'll see that one doesn't. They're living in Duluth here. This is just after the Second World War, and they're living down where a lot of people really like to go right now, which is Canal Park. But years ago, it was kind of an industrial area, a Bowery area, and then right across the harbor there, where was scrap yards. And so sometimes in winter, even though it's a very dangerous thing, people would cross over the ice to get from one place to another. And that is similar to one of our old stories about Nanabuju and his brother Mayangan the wolf crossing over ice. So I'll start here. This is after this man, Mickey, had left someone's house and was going to go home. Back of Maggie's house, Mickey stood at the shoreline and stepped onto snow-covered ice, his feet warm in Mr. Lukashevsky's old boots. Yeah, like summer, he thought, wiggling his toes. Late summer, like when we had to leave Maggie's and walk to the train to go to the Harrods school. Mickey walked lightly on warm concrete, a city sidewalk, his paws tapping a silent rhythm that left no prints. Behind walked his cousins, Gurley, Bud, George, and Vernon, resigned to grief yet hopeful, two carrying a lunch for the journey in extra clothing, one holding the hand of a small boy whose round face was shiny and stretched with crying, the son in captivity. Weeb, Ma doesn't want us to miss the train. Bud hoisted the smallest boy up onto his back. They quickened their steps, and Mickey became the wolf, leading the pack to the train depot. Through his thin-soled boarding school shoes, his paws felt the hardness of hot concrete toward the train depot, the silent pattern and unrelenting and unforgiving song repeating itself in his head and heart. One day in, one day in the one day. In the spring, they would retrace the steps, but in reverse. Their time at boarding schools breaking season to season, life to life. Maggie's children and Maingan created as everything else was to draw breath and appear, to fulfill a purpose, to leave. And what of their time at Herod? Surely their purpose there would be to eyewitness, to remember. But now, Mickey's feet, warm as summer in Mr. Lukashevsky's old boots, stepped onto the frozen bay. They would take a shortcut to the depot, he thought, and not miss the train. And so that February evening, the wolf, who was also both Waboos and Mickey, loped across the ice-crusted frozen bay, his paws tapping a silent rhythm so light that they left no prints. As he ran, a cloud drifted from the face of the moon, that rising, eerily exposed shadowed drifts and peaks of snow, then an expanse of whiteness, and beyond that, the lights of the houses. He saw the way so clearly, the frozen white terrain reflecting moonlight past the blackness of night sky to the stars that grew to glittering flowers that bent in their heaviness toward the earth. In those contrasts of light and dark, Maggie's shingle-sided house was the color of the sky, the light in her kitchen window a yellow, small and weak in the shadows of the grain elevators that had become columns that changed from white to invisible columns and back again as clouds drifted across the moon. So too, Maingan's coat changed its hue back and forth, as he ran past elevators A, B, C, D, along the shoreline, in and out of shadows, the color of lost lake on a summer night, in and out of light of the white of snow, ice, and stars. He ran, thinking of Maggie's house and of Maggie, Louis, Helen, and Beak inside. The kitchen light would go out, and they would sleep in the sweetness of each other's presence in the little shingle-sided house. He ran, camouflaged by his coat that changed colors under the shifting light of moon, star snows. He ran through night air that cooled and soothed his chest and lungs so that his cough became a memory that could possibly never return. And halfway across the bay, he thought about what a pleasure it would be to smoke a cigarette in the midst of all that beauty of light and shadow, stars and moonlight, snow and ice and the twinkling lights of downtown, to smoke a cigarette without wheezing and coughing and spitting. And so he paused to light a match, inhaled to suck the flame into the end of the cigarette, and felt the cloudiness of smoldering tobacco sink down into his lungs, where it entered his bloodstream, that it lit as brightly as the surrounding bay. Oh, Sagaswa, he said lovingly to the little fire at the end of the cigarette. Beneath Maingan's feet, beneath the ice where he stood, Misaabekong, the lake spirits, turned their faces toward the glow above and the outline of Mr. Lukashevsky's pair of winter boots. In their silent underwater way of speaking, they recounted to each other old stories of conflict and revenge, of Nanabuju and his younger brother Maingan, of the sacred promise made in the memory of the ancient one, leader in generations that ruled the lake long before the memory of mortals. His death would be avenged and avenged again. The cold hearts of the Oshki Misaabekong heated and the surface of the frozen bay softened. Wait, the oldest and most experienced said in his underwater voice, as red winter suns throbbed within their large ice gray bodies, and they maintained their patience as the cigarette burned its way down, as the glow of orange fire dimmed and died. Days and done, commanded the oldest. They listened then as Maingan coughed deeply and sighed, and then as the soles of Mr. Lukashevsky's old winter boots began to move, the steps increasing in speed as Maingan resumed his lope, now heavier and tiring toward the shore. He grew cold, but ran. He ran, boots now feeling like the concrete of winter. Ahead, the lights of the houses near the shore seemed to grow no closer, but soon he would see them, or should he turn around and go back to Maggie's? Would they hear the heaviness of his breathing that was now becoming a wheeze, a whistle, and would they look out the kitchen window, unable to see him but waiting? Home, he thought, home. Maingan's lope grew uneven and ragged. The boots, sinking through the crust over snow, blemished its shining expanse of whiteness with prints that ringed his legs, just the tops of the boots, and chafed his ankles. Panting white puffs of breath, he turned and saw, he thought, Maggie's house just up ahead, kitchen window again lit, a brighter yellow now, the moon lighting the railroad tracks along the shore to the color of the stars. I'll be there soon, Maingan said to himself. To settle his nerves, he stopped to roll another cigarette. Almost there, he thought, as he struck the match. And the lake spirits who had followed the outline of Lewis's boots broke the surface to once again seal the doom of Maingan, the little brother of Nanabuju. The story was true then, and it was true when Mickey, who bore the spirit of rabbit and wolf, repeated the encounter. That's how it was then, and how it still is today. Kind of scary. So that is, that is an old story, and that is just, as I was thinking about different things that have happened with different people I know, it occurred to me that that might be one new telling of the story. That's not the story itself, but something new that is happening. Do you want to read some more? Want me to read, or do you want to ask questions? Does it matter? Okay. All right, this is Rabbits in the Snow. It's a brief thing. When I see them, it is by moonlight. Rabbits sitting on top of the snow outside in the middle of the night when I can't sleep, or when something wakes me up. The house framework cracking and snapping in the cold, or the furnace kicking in, interrupting a dream. I get up out of bed and walk to the window to look outside, and the times I see them, the night is still, and so are they, their legs folded beneath their bodies and their ears down. They are there to watch over us, I've heard. When I see them on winter nights, I think of Nanabuju, who was at birth a white bunny rabbit. In his name, we can hear the connection to the word for rabbit, waboos. A small rabbit is a bunny, a wabusuns. And this has been my oldest daughter's nickname since she was a little girl. Wabasuns has another name that was given to her when she was a teenager, but I'm especially fond of her childhood name because it reminds me of those days. How long a time span there has been between the birth of that tiny Wabus and his naming, and my daughter's birth and then her naming, we don't know. What we do know is that the stories about Nanabuju usually begin with Meoja, long time ago. So as I introduce the story, this is the way I heard it as it was continued from an earlier story. And within the story, perhaps the mystery of how much of this still happens today. I'm going to read one more thing here. I'm going to read a poem. It's called The Beanbag. And it is about a woman in our family who passed away a long time ago. She was one of those older ladies who always wore those almost always blue cotton house dress that went almost down to her ankles. She had a belt on, and she always had her nice hanky folded over the belt. When she blew her nose, it was never in that hanky that was on her belt. And she wore those, she wore thick stockings and those little old lady shoes that used to have those little high chunky heels about 1.5 inches and laced so that she could move around. And she wore her hair in a bun. We loved her. So this is called The Beanbag. When the snow began to thaw, at first we saw only a trace of flowered calico. Then every day more cotton flowers bloomed, deep blue blossoms wet with melting snow. Familiar it looked, and I remembered forget-me-nots on her favorite house dress, that when worn out she crocheted with a hook into a rug mostly, the smallest scrap she sewed into a child's toy, a beanbag. I remember that dress. As a child, when she held me close, my face against her soft flowered middle, smelling starch and warm geranium in her soft and cool fleshy embrace, I felt small, an infant, or not yet born, in a cocoon of blue flowered cloth. Early in spring, after she died, one day I recognized that flowered dress, forget-me-nots on cotton, wet buds of blue flowers, on a beanbag we were kicking around the yard. Split, it spilled the past. Her kitchen floor, bumpy patterned linoleum, shiny and bare, reflecting wavy geraniums in coffee cans, nurtured from seeds of their own great-grandmothers. Checkered oilcloth leaned to white pearl scallops at the edge by her daughter's slender bending waists, and ground to silver dollars, several pairs, by her ravenous son's elbows. Kitchen wood stove, a hot, dull black, bread baking in the oven. Above, noodles boiling, tomatoes roiling, singing huffs of steam above our heads. I remembered when the beanbag spilled the past. When it split and spilled the past, I remembered, and picked it up to see it one more time. And what was that? I looked close and closer. Through its frayed weave, in returning to the earth, the bag held life beyond the tiny past. Split and spilt, its damp side finely pierced by an infant bean seedling, yet blind, but greedy for the light, born in a cocoon of flowered blue calico, a pattern wet with snow, forget-me-nots an early sign of spring, entwined now with a trace of tender green. That dress, I remember her flowered dress. So, well, thank you for letting me read. If anyone has any questions or comments, I, would sure welcome them. Do I see one, two?
So I invite you to put a question in the chat if you'd like. If you wouldn't want to say it out loud. If you do want to ask a question out loud, I invite you to use the raise hand feature.
Whoops. Are we there?
Let's see, it looks like Janelle has a question. Janelle, would you like to go ahead?
Oh, I got to unmute. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing
You're
well.
doing
Can you still see me? I seem to have lost
Yeah.
the picture. Okay. All right. Let's
I
go
can
then.
see you.
Okay.
So-
That's great.
So we all know that Nanabuju stories are told in the winter. Is the release of the book, I know it came out, as to my knowledge, before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you're doing like this little book tour, is this softly, the timing of this have to do with, because I wouldn't say what you published in your book has to be, absolutely has to be said in the winter, but is that kind of like a homage to those stories, like the timing of this book?
Oh, I think that might be how it worked out and how maybe it was meant to be. But the publishing process with there's a lot of steps involved to this, and it just happened to be that it came out at that time. So it is, I think it's maybe the way things that are meant to be that honored that season of storytelling. I mean, certainly, we can read things about the old teachings, whether there's snow on the ground or not, but the actual formal, well, what you call it, formal, the telling of the stories, takes place when there's snow on the ground. But we can talk about Nanabuju at other times of the year too. So yeah, I think it just worked out that way. That's an excellent question about this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Erickson asks, how has your writing evolved over time?
My first book, The Dance Boots, was a collection of stories, and it was eight linked stories. And so it reads like a novel, but each story was written separately. And I'd started writing stories, fiction, because the poetry I was writing had gotten to be kind of long. And I thought at one point as I was writing that maybe this is really actually prose that I'm doing. And so I started writing short stories, and I still write that way. So as I'm writing fiction, it's always in pieces that can be linked together. And Gichigami Hearts is the same way, I think, because there are 12 things in here. They certainly are linked, but it is not, this is how the story begins and this is how the story ends. And so in that way, my writing's evolved. I've had more time since, during the pandemic, I actually had quite a bit of time to write and to revise, which I do all the time. And then since retiring too, that my time really is my own. And so in that way, there's a freedom to write, like it's 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm not running to class here. I'm just still sitting here and continuing to write. And so that's the way things have evolved. I've always liked writing. When I was a little girl, I used to like to write things, but I didn't start writing with the idea of making something that might be read by other people or even put into a book until I was actually finishing graduate school. And I was 59 when my first book was published. So it took a while, but I wasn't writing with that intent all my life. I didn't used to save things I wrote or anything, but since that time, now I do save things, thinking that I might make something out of them. kind of like if you sew, what you do with the, you know, the leftovers, the scraps.
We have a question from Nina. Nina has their hand raised. So Nina, if you want to unmute, you can go ahead.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Nina.
In reading Gichigami Hearts, it seems that you have the style of your writing. There's this kind of circular rhythm to your writing, and I haven't finished the book. But I was wondering if that was a traditional storytelling way, or if that's just your voice and your style. Where it seems like you kind of bring us somewhere and then you go back and grab something that you've told us and kind of cycle through, which is very enjoyable.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, I think of it as kind of a spiral effect, and it's, you know, it's, it'd be a great, you know, great honor to me to think that, you know, that way of telling a story has similarities with the traditional ways of passing knowledge. I know with the old time stories, the Nanu Buju stories, and what we, you know, they're called the creation stories, but they have to do with the whole creation of the whole earth and universe here. Those stories can be really long or they can be really short. It is, nobody really knows exactly where they begin and where they end, or exactly the order of the stories. It's not like chapter 1, chapter 2. And it's, and I think in the big plan of things, that must exist, that shape of the stories as a body. But in the way we do them here, nobody knows all the stories. And that I think is, I think it was planned that way by the creator, that many people would have a piece of the knowledge that put together then weaves a big picture for everyone. And so people who are learning the stories, once a person who tells a story has heard that many times and has gotten into the rhythm of knowing when this particular event must happen at this point in the story. And so that is something that I think might have gotten into the rhythm of how I'm telling stories and backtracking and reminding and then continuing from there. And so when I think of it, though, if I'm thinking of it in spatially, I think of it as a spiral. You know, it just goes on and on and on.
Lynn asks, and she has a very fun way of putting this at first, writing is weird in that even when we intend to tell one kind of story from one part of our heart, something else comes out from some other emotional place. Is there any aspect of Gichigami Hearts that surprised you as you were writing it? Are there any other stories you've written that surprised you in the way they came out?
Yeah, I really feel what you're saying here, because yeah, many things that I write turn out quite different from what I thought they might be at the beginning. And so I might have a plan. Often I don't, and think that the story actually, you know, it's an entity, I guess, and has its own existence and will work itself into what it was. One example of this is that I can think of right now is when I was writing In the Night of Memory, my novel that came out a couple of years ago, where I'd been writing fiction about primarily women in northeastern Minnesota here. And I had thought in this book that I would be writing about two sisters and their experiences in the foster care system here in the county up here. As I started getting a little bit into the stories, though, it kind of what was emerging was that the the girls were in the foster system. There was a history to that, you know how they say things don't happen in a vacuum. They weren't just dropped into the foster care system. There's a story behind that. And so the story really, it's the girls' story, but it became more about their mother, how, and she was missing, how it can be that all of a sudden a young Native mother would just vanish. And what were the events in the community and the tribe, the community, the neighborhood, the family, that, you know, where everything kind of came to that point, and all of a sudden she was gone. And so the book became more of the girls reacting to something that was a trauma that they weren't even aware was a trauma as it was happening. So yeah, things really do take a different direction here. And it's, you know, I enjoy that. I mean, I appreciate the stories doing what they do.
Carolyn has an interesting question. So she's asking, how important are native words and expressions in your writing? Do you always think in English, or does your native language drive how you might communicate your experience?
Like many people, I try to learn Ojibwe language, and I'm not very good at it, and I, you know, may never be, probably will never be. But to me, it's important to me personally, and also for, you know, like for my children or my grandchildren, to have at least some type of relationship with the language. As a boarding school family, we pretty much lost the language, and you know, it was something that when I was a girl growing up, you know, you didn't hear all that often, and when you did, it was older people speaking it. They thought out of the hearing of children, and I think they were trying really hard to spare us, because they had really suffered in the squeezing of their language out of them while they were at school. And I think they didn't want us to suffer in the way that they had, to have really bad experiences. But with that, of course, we didn't really know the language. So I used to work with a guy years ago. We both worked as Indian advocates in the schools up north. And he told me that one of the things he wanted to do, he wanted to learn the language. So he said he was going to use it wherever he could. And so he began to often use a phrase or use a word, and it became a part of his speech pattern. And that kind of inspired me. And I thought, well, if he can do that, and he's doing this for, you know, doing it for the kids, for the students, and, you know, for the rest of us too, that I would do that too. So I started to think in that way. And so, and I still do that. And in that way, the language kind of grows a little bit within me. And, you know, if I'm able to use a little bit of it in my writing, it is out of, you know, great appreciation and honor for the people who really, the language is, you know, actually beaten out of them. And I know I did write in Onagamacing in that book about one of my uncles, and he was really pretty elderly, and my grandson was in Head Start, and we were at my mom and dad's house, and my grandson was singing this little song to himself out in the corner when he was playing, and it was like, you know, "Bonjour everybody," and "Wave to Aniji," kind of a song. And my uncle just said, "What's that? What's that he's singing?" And we were just, you know, really proud. He said, "Will you sing that for your Uncle Bob?" And he's all bashful, and he finally said, "Bonjour everybody," and "Wave to Anichi." And my Uncle Bob started laughing, you know, just in pleasure, you know. And I said, "Yeah, he learned that in Head Start." And he said, "Yeah, boy, they teach it in school now, huh? You know, didn't used to be allowed." And it was very touching to see my uncle happy in that way. to see this little 4-year-old boy who was just bringing a couple of words into the world here that hopefully he would expand on. So that's why I do it. It's an honoring, almost a prayer of thanks to people.
Katie asks, I'm intrigued by the mixing of fiction and nonfiction, myth and history. Why did you choose to put them together instead of in separate collections?
It was a luxury being able to do this with Gichigami Hearts. This book, I guess, of everything I've done, this is the one that is most reflective, representative of me and how I've observed things and how I've, the thought that I've given to them, and then how I would want to, return them to the world. And so, yeah, there's a mixture of many things in here. And I think of it as something that is one picture, one portrait here of a family and community. It's like writing from a sense of, I said this before, I think of time and place, and the backdrop of history and the backdrop of creation and of the land around us and how we live our lives, and with our histories and what will the future be from there is what Gichigami Hearts is really all about, I think. So it was a pleasure to be able to do this. It was I enjoyed it very much.
Okay, I have a question from Beth Bartlett. She writes,
Yeah.
Hello to Beth. I loved all you shared about your family and growing up in Duluth. As someone who has no family ties here, I was struck by all the ways your extended family members interweave and wondered how it is to be surrounded by family of many generations. Could you talk about that a little more?
I guess we take a lot of this for granted here. And I saw some funny little comment on Facebook that somebody said, man, I just met somebody who only has like about 3 cousins. I thought everybody had 50 cousins. And so I think maybe it's like that. We are not all together all the time, but yet we're still in the area here. And when I was a little girl, that was our social life and our interactions with our family, the extended family. And there are people in the family who are, they're relatives by blood, and there's people who are relatives just by heart, by love. And I enjoyed growing up amongst the Italians. I wrote about the Italians here. I had such a tremendous love for that extended family. And even though we're not Italian ourselves, becoming part of something else is a big web of Duluth, I think. So we're present here, and we know this, even though we might not see each other much. I mean, we have cousins who we rarely see, even though they live right in town. And that connection, it's so important. And I think when I think about our grandparents and their parents and the great disruptions that were in those families, I mean federal Indian policies and the boarding school system was only one of them that were designed to just kind of eliminate us as a people. I think that gave us a great appreciation for families too. I mean, it's not like we're always all together and always getting along and agreeing, and that's not it. But we are still here. We have cousins now that things like Facebook exist. We have cousins who haven't lived here in many years, but we all still feel that closeness, and especially through something like the internet now, where communication is so easy, that that their tie is here, and they consider this place where we live, but also where the the land is here and where their history is here. They consider this home, whether they live here or not.
Okay, question from Nancy Erickson. As an aside, Linda, I loved that joke about meeting someone who only has 3 cousins. I can relate to that one, someone with a large Twin Ports family myself. But Nancy Erickson asks a question about education. She says, I teach in a middle school whose student body is 5% Seminole. We recently had a presentation from the tribe in Hollywood, Florida, about young Seminole students and what the teachers needed to understand better to improve our teaching for them. How do you see the young students in Minnesota coping with the weight of the Indian boarding school legacy and the way schools are now?
Many of the children who are in middle school are, I think, the boarding school part of history might be fairly new to them too, as it is to many people. And I will say that when I was a girl growing up, we knew that our relatives had been schooled somewhere else, and that this was something not good. We were also careful not to ask a lot of questions, because it obviously made them feel really, really sad. Nowadays, more people know about that history, and that's a good thing. But it might be fairly new to any students that you might have in your classrooms too. And so I think it'd be a good idea to not assume that they necessarily know a lot about these things. It's a part in history that I don't know. I think maybe time might help as we get further from that experience. But I do think that it has affected the school experience of Native children, whether they know a lot of specifics or not. My family and everybody I know, older people in their family, always encourage them to go to school and get educated, go to school. This is a good thing for you to be doing. And yet we could feel in their words that this was a really, what would you call, a loaded concept to them. And I think they were really, I think they were nervous. I think they were apprehensive in sending us there. And I know I felt my own apprehensions in sending my own children to school too, just really very, very worried. And yet it was something that had to be done. I'm hoping that things are better now. I know that things like our graduation rate and stuff are not up north here, are certainly not, making a lot of headway in recent years. And it's something that I think from our community to continue to encourage and to instill a sense of pride, but also within the schools then too, everybody who works there, I think teachers and everyone else, I think it's important for them to be aware of this history, but at the same time, understand that what we want for our children is that they will be happy and that they will succeed, and that they don't have to kick aside all that is precious to us in order to succeed in school. And that's an easy thing for me to say. And I went to school a lot, and that was with me, every step of the way. So I think understanding that is really important. I thank you for that question, because I know this is a really tough piece of history.
Well, It's just about 8 o'clock. Linda, is there anything that you would like to any thoughts, final thoughts that you'd like to leave everybody with this evening?
I'm going to read the last couple paragraphs in my book, if that's okay. Okay, it's about the traveling song. When the traveling song begins, we stand to honor the traveler and also the drum, the singers and the song, and the creator. We give the song and the traveler the best of our heart's wishes for safety in all good things. I listen to the song and to the voices of the men on the drum, the sound, a rhythm that floats and wraps around everyone in the room. It is because of you that I walk. My eyes meet those of a woman I have known since we were girls, then mothers, then grandmothers. From across the drum, she smiles, recalling as I do other travelers and other journeys. Her lips move with mine as we breathe the words softly, so softly, below the singing of the men on the drum. It is because of you that I walk. Our silvery Mindamoya voices sounding much the way the sky does when it sings. So, miigwech everybody. I appreciate so much your visiting here with us tonight.
Miigwech, Linda, thank you for joining us. Again, if you haven't a copy already, Gichigami Hearts is available at our little Birchbark bookstore in person or online, as well as Linda's other books. So hooray for Ojibwe storytelling and worldviews, and hooray for the Point of Rocks. Thank you for joining us today, and be well.
Miigwech.